Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's really fantastic to see you all here online. There's a few of you online this evening, so hopefully this is a really interesting webinar for you, teaching you about some of the things around business succession planning. And part of my plan is to share some of my experiences that I have had with regards to succession planning or lack thereof over the last couple of years. And also to give an examples as I go through of what has happened when organizations have not done business succession planning, and ultimately what has happened also for those who have. So the webinar really is about giving you an understanding of 8 ways to make business succession planning a practical part of your strategy. So when I think about just a little bit about me, who am I? My name is Karen Walsh. I'm a business owner. So I run a business called Pure Magic International Business Solutions, obviously. I do international leadership development. I also do team development. I do a lot of executive coaching. I used to be a university lecturer in psychology in a former life. And currently we work on 3 different continents, being Africa, Australia, Fiji, where I spend a lot of my time. And in January, we actually start doing some work in Papua New Guinea. So interesting dynamics, interesting work, absolutely love what I do. And then for some of you on the line, you also know that I do a lot of work with women. So I've been developing leaders to grow organizations for over 25 years. I'm really passionate about leadership development for a whole range of different reasons. One of them, I think, is because a lot of the organizations, obviously, that we go into are not very well led. But also, in a bigger picture of the world, really, if I think about where we are today, the world is not being led very well, which I think largely is why we are where we are. But I guess that's another story. My firm focus has been on developing leaders and teams, and I think that the reason why I do this, and I love this particular part of my role, is because at the end of the day, the success or the failure or the life or the death of an organization depends on its leaders. So those, for example, who excel, those who engage with their people, those who understand strategy, those who have vision and know how to lead, or those who thrive. So people, for example, like Richard Branson, he would be a great example. Whereas many organizations aren't well led, you have narcissistic leaders or people who really don't understand how to lead, might not have a vision or strategy, and certainly don't prepare people down the line to take over from them when they leave the organization, i.e. business success. Oh, I'll try that again. Business succession planning. And it's a really interesting thing, because if I think about the majority of organizations with whom we have worked in the last 2 years, I would say at a push probably the majority of probably 30% of organizations would have strategic business succession planning in them. And I'll explain as I go through the danger of not having that and why that could ultimately bring an organization down. So I believe that really great and more impactful results are achieved through teams that work well together. And those are teams that really who have goals, they achieve their goals, they strive to achieve their goals. You know, they've got clear position descriptions, they've got key performance indicators, they know exactly what's involved in their role, they work well together, so that you have a culture of achievement and support as the dominant ways of working together in the organization. I write ebooks, I write books, I write columns for the international media, and I speak at about 20 to 30 conferences each year on topics ranging from anything to do with business and leadership to empowering women to thrive and how to be more resilient. So overall, that's a bit about me, not to spend too much time on me, but I think it's important that I introduce myself, because then it gives me, I guess, the understanding or the credibility as to why I'm able to talk about these things that I'm talking about all the time every month. So when we talk about what is business succession planning, I think it's a really important point that we understand it's a process for identifying and developing people with the potential to fill key business leadership positions in a company. So I'm working with an organization at the moment, and there are 206 people in this organization, and we formed a working party of a group of people to work out what they're going to do about succession planning, because they don't have any. And so they've identified 40 key jobs in the organization that should those jobs not be full or filled, then those jobs could leave the organization vulnerable, or, you know, in some way it could affect the organization adversely. But in a nutshell, it's really those critical organizational positions generally at the top of the organization, although some can be down the line, like an operations manager who's got 700 staff, you know, under them, and they're actually organizing different shifts and, you know, rosters and times. That's a critical role, although they might not be at the top of the organization. Increases the availability of experienced and capable people who are prepared to assume these roles as they become available. And ultimately what it means is that it develops a pool of talent. So there are numerous qualified candidates throughout the organization to fill the key vacancies in leadership. And I think it's an important thing to understand the difference between succession planning and replacement planning. So business succession planning is this process of looking for and identifying people down the line who can be upskilled and grown to fill leadership positions as that position becomes vacant, whilst replacement planning is more around replacing somebody in a job for a short period of time. So like a secondment, or if somebody's been, you know, go overseas on a sabbatical, you might bring a replacement in. But generally replacement is short term, business succession planning is longer term. So when we talk about succession planning, requires taking a hard look at the business to identify its needs and the opportunities that are in the organization to make sure that it succeeds. Any business succession planning has to fit in line with operational demands. So what I mean by that is, a lot of the time organizations say, well, that's it, we're going to have a business succession planning, and, you know, this is our new fad, our new strategy, and we're off to make sure that we get this right. I think there's some merit in that. However, at the end of the day, whatever strategies any organization brings into the organization or creates in the organization must be in line with operational demands. So I always say that operational demands are king and queen. Everything else that happens in an organization has to go after the processes, policies, and procedures that an organization must undertake in order to produce a product or service that really is the essence of why that particular organization is in business in the first place. And so business succession planning is done by creating a plan that fits with the company's long-term vision and long-term goals. There's also this myth that business succession planning is, well, we'll just do it in 6 months and we'll be right. No. Business succession planning is strategic, it's long-term. In fact, it's actually ongoing, so that it's a continuous movement of people through the pipeline, if you like, coming in the top of the funnel, through the funnel, filling those key positions to ensure the ongoing sustainability, profitability, and productivity of the organization, and ultimately coming out the other end. But as people come in the top of that funnel, that leadership pipeline, and move through the pipeline, so new people are coming in the top of the pipeline. And as people exit the other side of the pipeline, so people are coming in and people are moving through. I guess it's an ongoing process of ensuring that the organization has exemplary leaders who are well skilled, competent, and able to drive the organization forward at any stage. And I think that's a mindset that many leaders don't quite get. I think a lot of them that we work with don't even have business succession planning. And whenever we walk into an organization and there's no business succession planning, I literally shudder. I kind of get this shuddering down my spine. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, it can be a small organization, medium size, or large size. But generally, for example, the larger size organizations who don't have business succession planning leave themselves unbelievably vulnerable to mergers, takeovers, and also to going out of business. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute. Has to be evaluated regularly, obviously, and that comes back to what I was explaining, like the leadership pipeline. So when we talk about business succession planning, we're talking about essentially the objective is to ensure the ongoing sustainability and profitability of an organization. So that would be your overarching objective, but then your objective and the goals, the mini goals to reach that objective essentially is to upskill valuable people at all levels. to make sure that the organization thrives. The downside or the counter argument to that is that if you don't have business succession planning, the loss of valuable people at all levels can cripple a company. And it obviously becomes more disastrous in key roles if nobody's there to fill the position. So I'll give you an example. We were working with a really large organization. I won't tell you who or what industry or what country actually, but we were working with this organization, and it was an organization responsible for transportation in and out of the country. That's probably the best way I can describe it. And it was an organization with 4,500 people, so a large organization, a national organization. We had been asked to come into this organization and to help sort out the leadership and to create highly performing teams. So we went into the organization, and one of the key things that we discovered very early on was that there was no succession planning. So bearing in mind, as I said, it's a national organization. It supplies people and organizations in the country, around the country, and it's got thousands of people working for it. One of the arms was, let's say, a catering arm. And this particular catering arm was basically responsible for ensuring that the catering of all national organizations was sufficient, and that catering was done daily, and that the quality of meals was good, and ultimately that, you know, meals were delivered on time, every time, nutritious meals. When we went into this organization, I realized very early on that there was no business succession planning. And I remember saying to the CEO, let's call him John, John, we have an issue here. Whilst you've called us in to do leadership development, and I was actually coaching the CEO, this man, John, I said to him, John, we have to urgently address this issue of business succession planning. His comment to me was he didn't see that it was that important or that relevant. And I said to him, John, let me give you an example. If this person who's responsible for all of the catering is taken out of that role, gets ill, gets unwell, deceases, heaven forbid that doesn't happen, or is poached, we are in serious trouble, because there was nobody in that organization who could fill that role anywhere, and even her junior manager did not have the skills. To which the CEO, John, said, Karen, don't be ridiculous. We've never been in that situation before. This is a company that's 55 years of age, and, you know, we've got loyal, dedicated people, and it's not going to happen. And I was really cheeky, and I said, John, I'm not happy about this. Anyway, lo and behold, would you believe this? No, you wouldn't. 3 months into the role that we had in terms of, you know, actually helping these people, teaching them and whatever, this particular catering person was poached. And the CEO came to me absolutely desperate and said, Karen, we've got a problem. I said, what? He said, the catering director's gone. And we looked everywhere in the country. We couldn't find a person, because it's a very specialized skill. It's not just catering. I mean, I'm making it sound very simplistic, and I don't mean to, but I'm trying to make a point that whilst it sounds simplistic, it was quite a skilled role. So we searched the country. There was nobody. We searched 2 other countries. We couldn't find. We eventually found somebody from the United Kingdom, and we flew this person out for 9 months whilst we searched for a replacement. Now, what was interesting in this particular case study is that the organization literally, ladies and gentlemen, was on its knees. If the catering arm of this organization did not succeed and do well, the whole organization was in jeopardy. We had various high-level politicians and high-level ministers and high-level people wanting to know what was going on, and, you know, it was really a very big deal. But the point that I'm trying to make, and the issue that I'm trying to get home to you, is that it was really simple. That in this particular organization, I ultimately identified that there were 11 key roles, and not one of those roles had been looked after. There was nobody being groomed in the wings. There was nobody being developed or trained or skilled up to take any of the 11 roles. And that was an example of how, as I'm just saying with this particular slide on the screen, it could have crippled that company. It was close to crippling it, and it could have been an absolute disaster. So business succession planning is preparing successors to take on vital roles in a company when the need arises. When this person was recruited as a replacement plan for the 9 months, we then found somebody in the organization and they were put on an extensive program to upskill them sufficiently to be able to take that role over when the replacement person left to go back to the United Kingdom. So identifying company weaknesses, and I think this is an important point, because what are those things that might actually mean that key positions are threatened or an organization is threatened? Inefficient customer service. So these are things that make companies weak. Poor finances, low quality products or services, high employee turnover. Quick thing about high employee turnover. When you have high employee turnover, it says to me we have issues happening in this organization. So it could be a range of different things: inadequate leadership, inadequate remuneration, inadequate opportunity. But very often CEOs will say, oh, well, high employee turnover, not a problem, we'll get more people. I think there's a danger in that. If you are leading or working in an organization where there is high employee turnover, I say my question is, why? Disloyal customers, it's an interesting thing. People and I, my clients, my staff and I talk about this. Is there such a thing as a disloyal customer? Absolutely there is. Or if they're not disloyal, they could be dissatisfied. They're loyal to us to an extent, but then if you're not delivering a product of, exemplary standard, ultimately they might be forced to go elsewhere. So what are those things that might threaten an organization? Things like price wars, things like buyers markets. Markets change. New competitors come on the market, demographic changes. Your clients might move, or you might move, or your clients have new buying habits, like, the old laptop situation where, the big mainframes, the IBMs of the world said, oh, we don't need those little laptop things. And ultimately, they didn't initially bring in the laptops, and, well, the Japanese brought in the laptops and the rest is history. Advancement in technology might make your product obsolete. We were talking about the other day, and I don't know whether it's the same wherever you are, because there's quite a few of you on the line, but remember the video stores? I mean, the video stores, we used to have like 15 in the area where I'm living, and there's not one left. Because, the internet, Netflix, Foxtel movies has made it obsolete. And so these things that I've just described are these things that actually affect organizations and ultimately can then affect leaders, leaders who might not be competent in the roles, leaders who might be asleep, for example, not seeing that technology is changing, leaders who might be stolen or poached, leaders who retire. And ultimately, if you haven't got any successes with all of these things going on the market, these are the things when you're in trouble. When turnover becomes critical. Well, turnover is critical in all organizations, although in NGOs and often in welfare-funded organizations it might not be as critical because it's a welfare model, but overall turnover is critical for most organizations. And suddenly you wake up and you realize, oh my gosh, there's no replacement for the CEO or the key financial director. Where are we going to get them? So you might think, well, okay, well, we can actually replace them, but it might take you 3 or 6 months to replace them, ladies and gentlemen. In that time, you might have a drop in efficiencies in the finance department. Invoices might not be done properly. Debt collection might not be done. So these are key things to think about if there are no replacement for key roles, or you don't have any candidates for promotion into those roles, or too many Indians and not enough chiefs. And so when I walk into organizations and I see this, it just instantly says to me, the real issue here is, at the end of the day, no planning, no foresight, no vision into thinking about what might happen. And I guess, one of the ways to think about effective business succession planning is this. It's an insurance policy to make sure that your organization is well looked after in the future. And if you don't have this insurance policy, even if it's a small organization, if you don't have this insurance policy for the key roles, beware. You're leaving yourself exposed and vulnerable. So what are the 8 ways to make business succession planning part of your organizational strategy? So there's various. Number 1 is look at the vision and the mission. So many organizations I go into, and I say to people, what's the vision? Don't know. I was working with a board couple of weeks ago in Australia, actually, and I was saying to them, 13 members of the board, what's your vision? Don't know. Not one of the 13 could tell me what their vision is. They could fumble around, it's in this sector or we provide that service, but not one of them who are running the board or running the organization could tell me. So when we talk about business succession planning, when we talk about anything to do with your business, real organizations that know where they're going, they've got the boats, very carefully and strategically sailing to where they want to go, they know what the vision is. They know what the mission is. So the vision is where are we going, what we stand for, and the mission is how we're going to get there. So first and foremost, what is it that we stand for and where are we going and how we're going to get there? The second thing is I would be looking at doing a SWOT analysis to identify the gaps that you have in your organization. So what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats we have at all levels. So you might have a leadership forum where you get your leaders together and you say, right, I would do this once or twice a year, no less than once a year. Where are we as an organization? How are we going? Are we strong? Where aren't we strong? What do we need to do? And from a SWOT analysis then to design an action plan to look at what are we going to do about being more effective and productive as an organization. In that process, ladies and gentlemen, you identify critical positions in the company. Your CEO, your finance director, your chairman of the board, maybe not. But certainly there would be key roles. So the captain of the ship, your CEO, would be probably the heads of most of your departments. So your operations head, your finance head, your HR head, but not always. Not always. It could be people down the line, as I explained. It could be operations manager who's running 6 shifts across 7 days, or 2 of them might be sharing that role. That's a critical role. So then you might say, actually, some of the critical roles are down the line. What are we going to do about securing those so that we have people what are the skills that are needed for people in those positions? And then once you've determined what skills people in those positions need, then you find and assess potential successors. So you might say, okay, well, we think that, John down the line would be a really great person to probably fill that role. But what I would encourage you to do is not just think about the actual tasks they do, but also character, personality. Are they outgoing people? Are they personable? Are they approachable? Are they the sort of leaders that people want to follow? What we know and what research tells us is that classically in organizations, people are promoted and go up an organization because technically they are sound. They know the numbers, they know the game, they know how to do the rostering, the operational demands, etc. But what we know from a lot of the research internationally is actually some of the best leaders are not necessarily those people who are technically sound. They're relationally very good, i.e. they have great relationships and the ability to form good relationships, sustain great relationships and networks, and they are surrounded by technically sound people. So don't always think a business successor has to be somebody who's technically good. No. They might not be that good technically or that, gifted, but they're great with relationships. The other thing to think about in business succession planning is don't always stay within the line. Choose people outside of the line. So you might move somebody from marketing, for example, into operational areas because they're really good at people, and you might have 700 people in operations. You realize that actually you've got enough technical people, but you want somebody who's really, influential and persuasive, so you're looking for somebody who's more outgoing. So move people around. Don't just be static and thinking down the line is where you need to find your successors, because often you can get them from outside of the line. Once you realize who they are and you've chosen them and you've had discussions with them, then you look at what their strengths are, their areas for improvement, and then you create individual development plans and you commit to those plans. So you might say, right, we have a year's gap that we want to get this person into the next role. So then you design and develop the individual development plan over the year. So they might have to go outside of the organization to get some more skills. They might have to do some of on-the-job training. They might have to do a degree. They might have to go through, a quick advancement or coaching program, whatever it is, to upskill them fast enough to get to where they need to go. And then obviously the key thing then would be to monitor their progress, monitor that they're actually doing, they're actually following up on what they're supposed to be doing. You might put them, for example, in the role that they are moving into for a while, monitor how they go, give them feedback, upskill them where they're struggling some more, just monitor how they go, because obviously your investment in them is to get them into that role when the person, the incumbent in that role, leaves. And just bearing in mind that it has to be an ongoing process. So business succession planning is not something that's an add-on, it's a strategic part of your strategy, and it is ongoing. Therefore, it needs to be, somebody has to be dedicated to the role. Normally in HR or also in organizational development. And regular review really is around key roles critical to the organization. As I said, ask yourself, do we have a successor, yes or no? Is there a plan? If not, what are we going to do about that? How do we recruit? That's always a good question, and that's probably the topic of yet another webinar, but many organizations don't recruit as well as they can. So they don't go through the process sufficiently, they don't weed out talent that's not necessarily fitting in the ethos of their organization, and often then what they do is that they bring in skills or talent or personalities that's actually become something or somebody that they really don't want. So I often encourage organizations when we go in, look at your recruitment, your onboarding, your induction programs or processes. What timeframes and evaluation progresses or processes do we have in place? Business succession planning is often an afterthought or no thought. As I've just explained, probably only 30% of organizations we go to have a business succession planning. Most of them don't. They haven't thought about it, or it hasn't been a critical strategy. But beware, ladies and gentlemen, just beware. If you don't use business succession planning as a critical part of your strategic plan constantly, you leave your organization vulnerable and exposed. If key roles are not filled, key skills are not developed, no business succession plan can bring an organization to its knees. And I've given you one very critical example that we experienced a couple of years ago. So if there are any questions, really happy to have any questions that you may have. Always want to chat. I love my chats. So if you want to have a chat with me or any questions that you might have, please feel free to do so right now. I'm always available for you. Moving forward, how we can help. So obviously these monthly webinars, as many of you know, there's a lot of you in the line tonight, and many of you I know, some of you I don't, but these monthly webinars are designed to help organizations become more efficient and proficient in everything they do. So we talk about a range of different things, everything from leadership to business development, to attributes of leaders, to emerging leaders, to dealing with difficult people, to having those hard conversations. And the webinars that I write and deliver are basically pitched so that people like yourselves and others become better at what they do. So how obviously we can help, which is what we do. We run leadership and specific team development programs. We run 26 one-day management and staff programs, resolving conflict, becoming an emotional intelligent leader, managing stress in the workplace, accidental counseling in the workplace, thinking win-win, which is part of a conflict resolution program we run. So if you go onto our website, you'd see it all. We do coaching and leadership retreats. Last year, I was really, really happy. One of the CEOs I coached last year, a female, beautiful woman, was named the 2016 Australian CEO of the Year in May this year, so we were so proud of that. But I do a lot of coaching and executives around the world, actually, not just in Australia. I've recently been coaching a politician, not in this country, in another country, which is a really interesting experience. I probably won't do a webinar about that, but it's very interesting. So go on to puremagicbusiness.com.au, see what we offer, see if there's anything that you feel we can help you with. Really happy to engage with you, help you, coach you, guide you, talk to you. And what we're going to offer you is a free strategic review. So what you have to do is, there's no cost to you in this. You'd have to book yourself in for a time with me. You go to mytimetrade.com, or you go to Pure Magic Business and you can do it through the website. And ultimately what will happen tomorrow is my marketing goddess, I call her, MJ, will send you all an invitation to have a free strategic review with me. That could be about anything in your organization. It could be about you. It could be about leadership. It could be about dealing with a difficult person, coaching, anything that you would like to discuss about your organization or where you find that you struggle. It would be an absolute pleasure to talk with you. So, and that probably would be for Thursday or probably one day next week, but MJ will send you some information about that tomorrow. So are there any questions that any of you may have that you would like me to answer? I'm more than happy to do so. So this is a question from Sam. Sam's asking me, is there any particular time frame from business succession planning? Look, it depends on the organization. You know, essentially those business succession plans or those programs that are well run have got people, as I said, in the pipeline. And you could have, for example, a CEO who's in the role now, and you're already grooming somebody under that CEO. But then you might have somebody already grooming somebody to take the, you know, the deputy CEO's role. So generally you're looking, I think, between a 12-month and a 3-year time frame. But it could be less. But 1 to 3 years, you know, to sort of move people through the pipeline. But, you know, it could be longer, generally not. And at the end of the day, as I've been saying throughout this presentation and this webinar, it's about keeping that leadership pipeline filled at all times. So there's no, you know, no difficulties that you have around filling positions, and also you look after the organization. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, it's a pleasure. I've loved working with you. Feel free to contact me anytime. And I love to see you on the strategic review. So be in touch, take care, and until I speak to you again, God bless. Bye.